Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul, Tengku Aziz, Minister of Finance, Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Mohamed Iqbal Rawther, Chairman of the Economic Club of Kuala Lumpur, Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Michael Yeo, President of KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning. On behalf of the ECKL and KSI, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the National Recovery Summit with the theme, Winning the War Against COVID, the Road to Recovery. We are indeed honored to have the Finance Minister and the Coordinating Minister of the National Recovery Plan, Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul, to deliver the opening keynote address, followed by a ministerial dialogue session. Thank you, Yang Berhormat Tengku, for gracing this summit and for your continued national service. We are glad that you are back at MOF to resume the efforts leading the national recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, it has only been 18 days since Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob was sworn in as the 9th Prime Minister on 22nd of August 2021. Within a week, the cabinet was formed to get things going, and all ministers were required to announce their KPIs for the first 100 days. On 31st August, the Finance Minister issued the inaugural 2022 pre-budget statement as part of the effort to improve the annual budget preparation process. Now, this is consistent with the international best practices, where the pre-budget statement is published to increase transparency, enhance engagement, and public confidence in the government's fiscal management. We must laud the MOF for this pioneering effort. Now, the speed at which the Prime Minister and the Cabinet got off the starting block is commendable. Indeed, after 20 months since the first case of COVID-19 was detected back in January 2020, and after more than 19,000 deaths from 1.9 million cases, Malaysia cannot afford not to move any faster towards national recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, I must say that no one anticipated the global COVID-19 pandemic to hit the world this badly. Global economy contracted by 3.2% in 2020, with the UK suffering the steepest contraction of 9.8%. Malaysia obviously was not spared, with our GDP contracting by 5.6% in 2020. Unemployment rate rose to 4.8%, and that means 769,000 unemployed persons as of June 2021. Our median monthly household income declined by 11.3% from 5,873 ringgit in 2019 to 5,209 ringgit in 2020. And poverty incidence rate increased from 5.6% in 2019 to 8.4% in 2020, meaning there are now some 640,000 households that are living below the poverty line income of 2,208 ringgit. Now, the government has so far announced 8 economic stimulus packages totaling 530 billion ringgit, from Prihatin back in March 2020 to most recently Pemulih 3 months ago in June 2021. Direct fiscal injection amounts to 83 billion ringgit, and up to June 2021, some 200 billion ringgit of the 530 billion ringgit have been utilized. This has partially contributed to our GDP growth of 7.1% in the first half of 2021. The key question many people have been asking is this enough? Well, there is still another 330 billion ringgit of the stimulus packages left to be utilized, and some 185 billion ringgit of the balanced budget 2021 to be spent in the second half of 2021. That should provide enough impetus for the economy to record a full year 2021 growth of 4%, at the top end of Bank Negara's official forecast. Ladies and gentlemen, No amount of stimulus packages or financial assistance would be enough as long as the economy remains substantially closed. And this brings us to the issue of the need to reopen the economy safely and gradually in line with the increase in vaccination rate. As said yesterday, some 16.4 million Malaysians have already completed 2 doses of vaccination, representing half of Malaysia's population of 32.7 million, or 70% of the total adult population. At the current daily vaccination rate of 300,000 doses per day, one of the highest in the world, Malaysia has already reached herd immunity level in Klang Valley at the end of August, and nationwide herd immunity is expected by the end of September. We welcome yesterday's announcement of Klang Valley moving into phase 2 of the NRP from tomorrow, 10 September. And as more economic activities being permitted gradually in line with the NRP, the prospects of achieving 4% GDP growth in 2021 will certainly become clearer. Yang Berhormat Tengku, 16 months ago in May 2020, you unveiled the 6R Economic Recovery Plan comprising Resolve, Resilience, Restart, Recovery, Revitalize, and Reform. And as part of the reform agenda, the government last month launched the GLIC mandate recharge, or in Bahasa Malaysia, Perkukuh Pelaburan Rakyat GLIC, to reform the mandate and roles of government-linked investment companies. The reform comprises 20 key initiatives aimed at achieving a clearer mandate for each GLIC, more investments in catalytic and developmental areas, increased private sector participation, and streamlining the government's role. In embracing the reform spirit truly, it is our hope that the government will consider following through on a number of additional reform agenda. And this includes, in particular, one matter which we would like to raise this morning, about the labor reform. Now, this labor reform involves, among others, the gradual planned increase in minimum wage, moving towards the living wage, and reviewing our policy on recruitment of foreign labor. This is very much in line with a commitment to further strengthen the sustainability agenda in Budget 2022, as stated in the pre-budget statement. On foreign labor, there is one pressing matter that needs immediate attention, and that is the allegations of forced labor and modern slavery currently affecting some plantation companies and rubber glove manufacturing companies. Now, many of these allegations relate to the bonding of the foreign workers by recruitment agents in their country of origin because of the huge debt that they had to incur before they come to Malaysia. Now, this is a major pressing issue that needs to be addressed by the government in 2 areas in particular. One is in respect of engaging with the US government to secure the upliftment of the withhold release orders, or WRO, by the US Customs and Borders Protection, issued currently to 4 Malaysian companies, and the number could be growing. And second support would be in respect of the policy on the appointment of foreign recruitment agents, which charge very high fees to foreign workers. Unless we address this urgently, the WRO and also the categorization of Malaysia as a tier 3 country under the Trafficking in Persons report will cause untold damage to the Malaysian economy. This is because, in line with global commitments towards sustainability and ESG, many global businesses will exclude companies that are accused of engaging in forced labor practices and modern slavery from the supply chain. And if this spreads to the E&E sector, the damage will be irreparable. Ladies and gentlemen, turning to the capital market and wearing my Bursa Malaysia hat, Bursa Malaysia had a great year in 2020. Business volume, as measured by the average daily trading value, doubled from 1.9 billion ringgit to 4.2 billion ringgit in 2020. The FBM KLCI increased 2.4%, to 1,627 points, the second best performing market in the region. Business momentum continued into the first half of 2021, with average daily trading value increasing to 4.4 billion ringgit. But with the worsening COVID-19 cases and prolonged movement control orders, FBM KLCI declined by 5.8% to 1,533 points as at 30th June 2021, making our market one of the least performing markets in the region for the first half of 2021. The good news is that the market has recovered significantly in August 2021. Foreign funds turned net buyers for the first time since June 2019, with net inflow of 1.1 billion ringgit. The FBM KLCI was up 7.1% month on month to close at 1,601 points at the end of August. The improved sentiments were partly supported by resilient corporate profits for the second quarter of 2021, which increased by 113% year-on-year and 3% quarter-on-quarter. Similar positive sentiments were observed in the Malaysian bond market, with foreign holding increasing by 6.6 billion ringgit in August 2021, bringing the year-to-date net inflow to 24.6 billion ringgit. With the anticipated safe reopening of the economy in line with the National Recovery Plan, and with the business-like approach and constructive attitude of the government, the business community, and the people, Keluarga Malaysia if you like, we are hopeful that Malaysia will rebound and build back better, and hopefully greener too. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, with that cautionary positive hope, it gives me great pleasure to invite our Finance Minister, Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul, Tengku Aziz, to deliver his opening keynote address. Yang Berhormat Tengku, silakan.
Thank you very much. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, Chairman of the Advisory Council of the Economic Club of Kuala Lumpur. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Michael Yeo, President of the KSI Strategic Institute of Asia Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Foremost, allow me to express my gratitude to the organizer of the National Recovery Summit for the honor of delivering this morning's keynote address, as well as the dialogue. Roughly 18 months since COVID-19 first shook the world, humanity continues to grapple with the twin shock of the pandemic, namely the direct public health impact, as well as the unprecedented decline as large parts of the economy were shuttered to contain the spread of the disease. Closer to home, Malaysia has been in wave after wave of infections, recording over 1.8 million cases and losing over 18,000 lives thus far. The economic price has been dear and devastating. Aside from Malaysia's GDP contracting 5.6% in 2020, it is the vulnerable segment of our society that has been hit the hardest. And this battle is far from over. The economic outlook remains intertwined with that of the virus, and the path of economic recovery hinges on first getting it under control. Recent indicator suggests near-term challenges stemming from elevated infections and persistent public health problems. New challenges are also emerging in the form of more dangerous variants and growing community transmissions. Understandably, many Malaysians are frustrated, be it the breadwinner looking for a job, the business owner unable to fully operate, or the medical frontliner on the verge of burnout. These challenges reflect the difficult path to recovery. A good place to begin our recovery journey is by thanking those on the front lines battling the pandemic and the workers who have kept the economy and essential services going. We should also keep in our thoughts those who have lost their lives to COVID, as well as their loved ones left behind. And now our world has changed dramatically. The pandemic has upended upended many always of how we earn a living, shop, learn and play, and even how we interact with our loved ones and others like our employers, customers, suppliers, and stakeholders. Thus, there is a pressing need to meet these challenges and embrace these changes, both immediate and imminent. Ladies and gentlemen, the various approaches to the pandemic, be it the National COVID-19 Immunization Program, the Safe at Work initiative, and the various assistance packages implemented culminates in the National Recovery Plan, or the NRP. Truly, it is a comprehensive approach to restoring consumer confidence while allowing our economy to open safely. At its heart, the NRP will catapult the nation on the path to recovery. Drawing on advice by the World Health Organization and the experience of countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, the NRP holistically assesses a state's readiness to ease restrictions while recognizing the need for a multifaceted recovery. Progress is tracked through three headlines indicators, namely average number of daily new cases, and these are cases in category 3, 4, and 5, utilization of ICU beds, both of which indicates our system's capacity to respond, as well as the percentage of eligible adult population fully vaccinated. So through these matrices, several states have graduated to different phases of the NRP. Just yesterday, Yang Amat Berhormat Prime Minister announced that Klang Valley will transition to phase 2, effective tomorrow, 10th of September. Testimony to the NRP's dynamic approach while ensuring both lives and livelihoods are preserved, the government has also announced the opening of the retail sector, as well as the relaxation of SOPs for sports, leisure, and recreational activities in phase 1 localities. Easing of restriction for those fully vaccinated, including most recently for those in the creative industry, and prospects of a travel bubble for tourist destinations in Malaysia, such as Langkawi, which will begin on Hari Malaysia. Alhamdulillah, we have seen some great progress thus far. Since its inception, we have dramatically improved testing capabilities and accelerated vaccine rollout. However, I recognize that there is still much left to do, especially in strengthening our healthcare system's capacity and nurturing the recovery of our people and industry. Ladies and gentlemen, in the immediate term, the National Recovery Plan focuses on the effective management of the pandemic by breaking chains of transmission, reducing morbidity and mortality, while maintaining sufficient support for non-COVID-19 needs. To expand testing efforts, the Ministry of Health has recognized RTK antigen and approved several COVID-19 self-test kits, which can be bought in pharmacies nationwide. Moreover, in making the self-test kits accessible to everyone, the Minister or the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, as well as the Ministry of Health, have set the price ceiling for these kits to be below 20 ringgit. Both ministries are looking at further revising down the prices by end of this year. The government is also enhancing contact tracing by expanding the use of technology and mobility data. Potential close contacts will soon be identified and notified of the need to quarantine themselves. Asymptomatic and cases with minor symptoms are now subject to a home surveillance order. Moving forward, the government will progressively update the NRP to prepare Malaysia at the next normal of living with COVID-19 as an endemic disease. Without a doubt, COVID-19 has shown that public healthcare is an important foundation to enable other sectors to operate. As such, we will not compromise on what is required to place our public healthcare on a stronger footing through the NRP and later through Budget 2022. Among the new measures to be implemented include, firstly, we are in the process of establishing a dedicated call center to offer immediate assistance in managing COVID-19 causes. Secondly, whole genome sequencing is being undertaken by the Institute of Medical Research to detect the presence and spread of new variants in Malaysia. Thirdly, studying a much better way of deploying the find, test, trace, isolate, and support, or FTTIS, on an end-to-end basis. Fourth, looking at effective ways of managing the long COVID-19, a condition wherein people continue to experience COVID-19 symptoms for longer than usual after initially contracting the virus. And fifth, factoring in booster shots or multi-year vaccination programs into our public healthcare protocols. Beyond the pandemic, the government is studying efforts to strengthen the healthcare system's resiliency and preparedness for future pandemics while meeting the longer-term challenges of an aging population and non-communicable diseases. Policy measures being studied include putting in place an always-on system and partnerships that can rapidly scale during pandemics, strengthening national and local mechanisms to detect infectious disease, to stop transmission at early stage, ensuring health system readiness to handle surges while maintaining essential services, and developing an integrated epidemic prevention agenda. Such reforms will ensure the protection of lives and livelihoods while keeping the economy open for business. Ladies and gentlemen, achieving a target level of population immunity is a key enabler on Malaysia's path to recovery. As of September 7th, September, more than 20 million people, or 89% of the country's adult population, has received their first shot, including 16 million, or 70%, who are now fully vaccinated. Inshallah, we are well on our way to have 80% of the adult population fully vaccinated by end of September and 100% by end of October. Thereafter, we will start living with COVID-19 as an endemic disease. So far, we have seen this effort bear fruit in the number of hospitalization and ICU cases, which continue to decline. This is especially true in parts of the country where more than 60% of the adult population have been fully vaccinated. As Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, and Putrajaya move to phase 2 on 10th of September, we will enable the reopening of more economic activities, which will spur the economic recovery of our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic downturn has not affected all Malaysians equally, and those least able to shoulder the burden have been hit hardest. Despite making progress, unemployment continues to disproportionately affect the most vulnerable in our society, especially the lower and daily wage earners in the services sector. The unevenness of the recovery can be further seen through the lens of the sectoral shift of spending into durable and essential goods and away from services, particularly in-person services which involves contact-intensive activities such as tourism and hospitality. As the pandemic struck, footfall to recreational and retail outlets decreased by more than 40% relative to pre-pandemic levels. In contrast, spending on essentials has boomed since the start of the recovery, especially on specific food items. As such, an important component of our recovery agenda in the NRP and Budget 2022 is the economy. In the immediate term, both key policy measures will aid these hardest hit sectors and most affected households through targeted measures while minimizing long-term economic scarring. In maintaining livelihoods, the government has introduced 8 assistance packages in addition to Budget 2021. All in, over 260 billion ringgit has been disbursed as at end of July, benefiting over 20 million rakyat and 2.4 million businesses, with approximately 300 billion ringgit left to be spent this year. This includes a further 10 billion ringgit, which will be disbursed not only in terms of direct aid for B40s and M40s, but also targeted assistance for gig workers, the hardcore poor, the unemployed, as well as increased support for mental health issues. Of course, a key pillar of economic recovery is job creation. It is in that spirit that the National Employment Council, or NEC, continues to increase efforts to promote quality job opportunities, skills enhancements, and trainings. As at end of August, more than 350,000 jobs were created. Complementing this are initiatives like My Step, Pejana Kerjaya 2.0, the Corridor Reskilling and Upskilling, and the Pejana Reskilling and Upskilling programs. Graduating from poverty also entails investing in high-quality human capital. In 2020, children in emerging economies missed the equivalent of 45 days of school, and in fact compounded in 2021. To avoid a lost generation, immediate effort to double down on children most affected by school closures and empty classrooms is being undertaken by the Ministry of Education. One initiative, Tabur Cerdik, has distributed nearly 130,000 laptops as at 7th of September. And this is on track to complete its target of 150,000 devices distributed by end of the month. To supplement this is the Jaringan Prihatin program, where the government subsidizes the cost of purchasing a mobile device or monthly telco bill. Over 3.4 million Malaysians have benefited from this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken at length on the what, our efforts to strengthen the healthcare response to the pandemic, immunize the rakyat, and support people and businesses. Equally important is the how. National Recovery Plan is a dynamic, flexible, and agile roadmap that tackles the pandemic holistically, rather than anchoring on a single metric as a deciding factor for relaxing restrictions. Under the NRP, effective execution is made key and adapted based on current local scenarios. Updates are based on current needs supported by the most recent data, especially those based on science. The NRP is also inclusive, based on a whole-of-nation approach. The National Recovery Council, a coordinating body under the NRP, has representatives comprising the state governments of Sabah and Sarawak, as well as industry experts and NGOs to share their expertise on various aspects of the NRP. All in, the National Recovery Plan provides not just a light at the end of the tunnel, but a data-driven, dynamic, and inclusive way to navigate it. Just as it is critical for us to exit this pandemic safely and systematically, it is equally critical that we build back better. No doubt, the pandemic is changing and challenging our economy and society in unprecedented ways. A post-COVID-19 economy will be one of the dramatic shifts in trade and services, as well as harnessing the power of information and technology. The pandemic has deepened inequality. Work norms we were familiar with have changed forever. Sustainability and climate change have grown more pressing, and the world has seen a rapid adoption of digitalization and automation. In that respect, Budget 2022 is conceptualized as a recovery budget to complement the government's wider and longer-term efforts in terms of reform under the 12th Malaysia Plan. Theme around recovery, resilience, and reform, we have issued a pre-budget statement and 4 public consultation papers, a first in our history. On the latter, inputs are being sought on the following areas: improvement of the government procurement policy on local goods and services and procurement policy for the Bumiputra, improvement of cash assistance programs, review of tax incentive, and drafting of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. In this respect, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and suggestions as we craft what may be the most important budget in the history of our nation. Complementary to Budget 2022 is investment and getting the right kind with the right partners. This is where the National Investment Aspiration, led by the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, comes in the picture, with the goal of streamlining how investment is attracted, as well as integrating policy documents and investment-related initiatives. Of course, a unique driver of the Malaysia growth story is our government-linked investment companies, our GLICs, and our GLCs. The MOF has tasked both GLICs and GLCs to play a catalytic role in jump-starting the process of economic reform and restructuring. Empowering GLICs to fulfill that role is the objective of the recently announced Perkukuh Pelaburan Rakyat Program, or Perkukuh. Perkukuh comprises 20 key initiatives to achieve a clearer mandate for each GLIC, more investment in catalytic and developmental areas, increased private sector participation, and the streamlining of the government's role in business. For instance, Khazanah Nasional will kickstart development of new growth ecosystem through its new 6 billion ringgit Dana Impact or Dana Impact. Efforts are also underway to jumpstart co-investments with several international institutional investors and other sovereigns. Moreover, there are specific initiatives on future-proofing our GLICs, as well as strengthening the nation's social safeguards and fiscal resilience. Another critical ingredient is the Malaysian Digital Economy Blueprint, or MyDigital, to drive the business sector to compete on the global arena by addressing both digital infrastructure and digital ecosystem. The former includes investments through the National Digital Network, or called Jendela, investments to strengthen connectivity to the international submarine cable network until 2023, a 10-year plan for the implementation of 5G nationwide and in cloud services. Bringing MyDigital a full circle are efforts to strengthen the digital ecosystem, be it in areas of supporting digital adoption to privacy and data protection. Furthermore, in terms of our 5G aspirations, we are also accelerating the development and growth of high-speed, affordable, and reliable 5G connectivity and coverage for the socio-economic benefit of all Malaysians. We will kickstart phase 1 with 10% 5G coverage in Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya, and Cyberjaya by end of 2021. Phase 1B will cover approximately 40% net coverage in major cities in Selangor, Johor, Penang, Sabah, and Sarawak by end 2022, to be followed by the rest of the country in stages with 100% national coverage targeted by 2024. Combined, these measures will address the near-term efforts to place Malaysia's reopening on a stronger footing while ensuring the nation is well positioned to take full advantage of the mega trends of tomorrow in the mid and longer term. Ladies and gentlemen, before I end, allow me to re-emphasize that the COVID-19 pandemic is a test of not only our ingenuity, but also our humanity. It is this common thread that requires all parties to come together to harness the best traits of our society: solidarity, courage, creativity, and more importantly, empathy and compassion. We do not yet completely know how our economy and way of life will change, but what we can do is to focus our minds and energies on emerging from this crisis as a more resilient nation and keluarga Malaysia. Therefore, it is my hope that the NRP and Budget 2022 will serve as a template, not just on how we exit the pandemic, but also on how we navigate the more pressing challenges that lie ahead. We will harness data to help us be more agile and responsive, underscored by the spirit of inclusivity, to serve us on our continued path towards better resilience and shared prosperity. So to that end, I call on all parties, government, private sector, civil society organizations, just to name a few, to come together as one keluarga Malaysia. So let's come together and win together. On that note, allow me to thank and congratulate the Economic Club of Kuala Lumpur and the KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific for organizing today's National Recovery Summit. Thank you.
Thank you to the Coordinating Minister of National Recovery Plan and Minister of Finance, Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul bin Tunku Abdul Aziz, who delivered the opening keynote address and who represented the Prime Minister, who unfortunately couldn't make it for our summit this morning. We will now commence to the dialogue session with the Minister, and this dialogue will be moderated by Datuk Seri Mohamed Iqbal Rawther, Chairman of the Economic Club of Kuala Lumpur. Allow me to hand over the floor to Datuk Seri Mohamed Iqbal Rawther for the dialogue session.
Thank you very much, Zain. Assalamualaikum and selamat pagi to all our panelists and those participants who are following this Economic Recovery Summit, National Recovery Summit. First and foremost, I would like to thank Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Zafrul, the Finance Minister, for giving us a very, what we call, I won't say loaded, but very informative and well-articulated keynote address that gives the overall perspective of what is the action program that is taken by the government and how it is going to be implemented for the recovery. Congratulations, Tengku, and also congratulations for your, I won't say reappointment, I think coming back to the Ministry of Finance with the same vigor and stamina that you have shown during the earlier period in 2020. And I also would like to thank Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar for giving the introduction. From the two speeches, and more importantly from the speech delivered by Tengku Zafrul, if I may just say Tengku Zafrul, it is very clear that Malaysia is not out of the exceptional in one way or another, whether on the positive side or on the negative side. We are on the right track in addressing the COVID pandemic and how its impact on the nation, the industry, the healthcare system, and the society has been actively looked at. And now we have these immediate concerns and then also the midterm and the long-term concerns and how we are going to address this. Now, to start with, probably I would like to ask the Minister a couple of questions before I give the opportunity for other members of the team who are participating. The public will not be able to put up the questions, but those who are here who have listened to the Minister and able to interact with, we will have an opportunity. Tengku, you have mentioned that about 8 stimulus packages have been rolled out immediately and in the process. The question that comes is, although the amount is very huge, both direct from the government and also indirect through various other saving schemes of the people, and how these have been permitted to withdraw to tackle their own immediate family concerns. Probably about 900 billion all in all. Now the question is, how much more the nation can afford without impacting or impairing the nation's fiscal positions? We take note that you are going to put into Parliament to increase the debt ratio, and all these will have some concerns. Can you address this, please?
What I was saying just now, affordability aside, time and again, as you rightly mentioned just now, our commitment from the announcement of 8 stimulus and assistance packages since the onset of the pandemic, we have shown in terms of our commitment. And in the near future, we stand ready to provide additional fiscal support should there be a need in order to preserve the well-being of people and businesses, strengthen our healthcare system while minimizing the scarring to the wider economy. So for this year alone, for 2021, we have announced 4 assistance packages, totaling around 26.8 billion ringgit just in terms of fiscal injections. Consequently, obviously, the deficit is expected to increase from 5.4% as what we announced in budget 2021 now to around 6.5 to 7% of GDP. With our statutory debt, as you mentioned just now, expected to increase to above 60%, hence hitting the ceiling by end of the year. As I mentioned, should the need arise again, we will provide fiscal support through a combination of cost rationalization, dividends from the government ecosystem, as well as increasing the debt ceiling in order to facilitate more borrowings. When this crisis subsides in the longer term, to the mid to longer term, the government will resume its path of fiscal consolidation, guided by our medium-term fiscal framework and supported by the gradual implementation of the medium-term revenue strategy, which aims to improve the country's revenue base. So this will balance our short-term fiscal requirements with long-term fiscal and economic sustainability.
Thank you, Tengku. Maybe the second question that I would like to put to you is that the public health considerations have been given priority, no doubt, under the circumstances. I think you have to give that over economic matters. And the NRP is now trying to see a sort of a balance between the two and how we can go forward without compromising the health issues. What are the risks and measures you think or the government is contemplating to see if one way or the other the health becomes worse and the economy is impacted worse, or the health is sort of contained and then the economy recovers? Is there any scenario building that has been done in order to address this?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Right, well, last month, Bank Negara Malaysia revised our GDP forecast for this year to between 3 to 4%. This is obviously due to the imposition or re-imposition of nationwide containment measures that started in June 2021. Nevertheless, we've seen the reopening of the economy, and we expect this to support gradual recovery in the fourth quarter this year, as we've seen the economy slowly being opened up. And there's, of course, stronger external demand, and there's ramp up in commodity production. There's pent-up demand also, right? And continued investment in large-scale infrastructure projects following the lifting of restrictions. So the recovery is expected to accelerate further into 2022. And if you look at why we believe so, and we've seen that also by studies done by World Bank and IMF, for example. World Bank is expecting around growth in 2022 to be around 5%, IMF around 6%. This is because it's supported by a gradual normalization of economic activities, as well as the positive spillover from continued improvement in external demand. Of course, our economic recovery is intertwined, with our efforts, like you said just now, in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. Much will hinge on the speed of the vaccination program, on how ICU utilization progresses, as well as emergence of newer variants of the virus. On some of these fronts, we are seeing some promising signs. Globally, Malaysia is currently one of the fastest nations in administering vaccines, average of more than 400,000, as you know, daily. To date, as I mentioned in my speech earlier, 89% of Malaysia's adult population have received their first dose of vaccination. And at the current rate, it is expected that 80% of the nation's adult population will be vaccinated by end September, where we will start treating COVID-19 as endemic in October when it gets to 100%. Consequently, we have also seen our hospitalization and ICU rates stabilize in recent weeks. As of 6 September, the nationwide level was 68%, an improvement we can see especially in Klang Valley. So my point here is that yes, there is a need for us to balance the lives and livelihood, and lives, of course, is priority. But as we slowly address the issue of our healthcare capacity, we are then at the same time in parallel reopening in stages, systematically and safely, the economy, and we hope that this year our economy will show signs of a positive economic growth, like what Bank Negara has estimated and forecasted to be around 3 to 4%, and subsequently for 2022, we will post stronger growth as predicted by IMF, as forecasted by IMF and World Bank.
Thank you, Tengku. Maybe one last one from me in order to kickstart your keynote address and then give an opportunity to others to come out with their own questions, maybe. You mentioned about strengthening the healthcare system. I think this is very important. The first time the COVID impacted us, one of the features they said is flattening the curve so that the healthcare system is not overwhelmed. That is true. I think every country faced the same kind of a thing. And in our country, I think the healthcare is common to the whole population. And it is one of the better provisions of any country. And probably next to education, you have health taking up the big chunk of the federal budget and also the development expenditures. Is there any indication where we have gone wrong, or what wrong did we face during this pandemic, and how you as finance minister and as also the coordinating minister for the national recovery would take steps to see that we strengthen this healthcare system for the future?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think there's always room for improvements. Do we have to address this issue? Do we need to look at it, what we need to address now, today, what we need to address in the medium term, and what we need to address in the longer term? To say that we have underinvested, perhaps there's some reasons for that, some truth in it. But when we have to look at it in totality, holistically, what has the country has done in the last decade, especially when it comes to healthcare. So let's look at the short term. So we need to recognize that the road to recovery is often not smooth, but uneven with peaks, and we can see the graph up and down as we go up to recovery. That is true of Malaysia's economic story, for example. You remember the experience of the roaring 90s before the Asian financial crisis. The key has always been to build resilience to weather the shocks. So be it in the form of effective institutions, rule of law, robust infrastructure, and of course, using our deep reserves at the time. It has certainly paid off. We've seen between 1991 and 2020, Malaysia's Malaysia's GNI per capita grew 5.8 times, to 42,000 ringgit, despite experiencing 4 economic downturns in that same period between 1991 to 2020. So economic development is not smooth, but uneven with peaks and drought. So the same is true in the road to building a COVID-19 resilient society. It is uneven. We have ups and downs, and understandably, there have been moments of frustration and confusion. However, what is critical is that we continue to double down on building our resilience to weather these moments while keeping view of our collective end destination. So I mentioned earlier, the government is studying efforts to strengthen the healthcare system's resiliency. And of course, we need to be prepared and increase our preparedness for future pandemics while meeting the longer term challenges of our aging population and other non-communicable diseases. So what are the efforts? I can give you a few examples here. One is strengthening national and local mechanism to detect infectious disease, to stop transmissions at an early stage, studying a much better way of developing FTTIS on an end-to-end basis. And we want to develop an integrated epidemic prevention agenda. So inshallah, these efforts will go a long way in our effort to build a resilient society when it comes to our healthcare policies and plans.
Thank you very much. Can I open this to other members of the panel who are present with us this morning? If you have any thoughts or questions to share at this moment.
Datuk Seri, this is Abrar. Can I go?
Yes.
Sure.
Please.
Thank you. Wabi, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Basically, I'm also representing British Malaysian Chamber as well as the Standard Chartered. Thank you very much for a very detailed deliberation. And I think the national recovery, we are very hopeful with the herd immunity coming in with a very accelerated vaccination and phased opening up. I just wanted to share some insights as the recovery happens, some insights from our member companies in the chamber. As Malaysia is looking forward to knowledge economy and the R&D and E&E sector, some of the customers are actually really struggling to a great extent because OECD markets have really opened up. Recently, I was also outside US, Europe. So the demand for E&E products are really spiraling. So some of these companies are not being able to really operate even at 50% because it's not only about their R&D center, but also the ecosystem. So they have around 20, 30,000, all supply chain is, their main production is in Malaysia. So that's one case in point. And also the some of the expatriates going out and coming in is actually very complicated. Normally they don't get approval. So it is creating a lot of tension. They're all staying away from family constraints. Plus also with the vaccinated people getting home quarantine, some process can also be improved because it's also quite bureaucratic at the moment. So in this process, we suggest that if something can be looked at, YB, it will be very helpful for our members and also for Malaysia as well. Thank you for opening up.
Thank you, Abra.
Thank you, Abra.
Yes.
Just say a few words there. Yeah, thank you for that, the feedback, Abra. We have set up a committee chaired by our Minister of Defence, Senior Minister of Defence, Datuk Seri Hisham. He will, together with Tan Sri Anwar Musa, which is our Communication Minister, and KJ, our Minister of Health, and myself, sitting down to look at some of the issues that you have raised. We are also looking at issues other stakeholders have raised, and more importantly, we need to also prepare ourselves as we declare our country endemic, but hopefully by end of October, when we reach the 100% vaccination rate for adult population. We need to relook at what the SOP should be. There are obviously some shortcomings. We need to standardize, synchronize the SOPs, and that's being done as we speak. And you will see more and more of this also being discussed at the Pandemic Council, at the Pandemic Committee, and also at the National Recovery Council.
Yeah, I think it's true what Mr. Abrar Anwar raised regarding this expatriate working in the country, which is a component part of the investment program. As you rightly pointed out, the aspirations under the MITI, the revamping of how we can attract the foreign direct investment. And if there are shortcomings which are experienced by mainly the chambers of commerce, in this case, the European Chamber or the Japanese Chamber, and many other chambers have expressed concerns on this with their expatriate staff. At the same time, this foreign labor issue, I think this is not a platform to look at the specifics, but generally, I think there is a problem with regard to this foreign labor, which affects the investment coming into the country and how it is being regulated because of what we can say consistency in the policies. And when policies change, it drastically affects the industry's concern. So it is just a concern that is being expressed. Perhaps you can look into it from your Recovery Council, the National Recovery Council, and address it. And of course, ECKL and KSI would be able to help some of our thoughts on how to mitigate the problems that are being faced. You have any thoughts to add on, Tengku?
Thank you, Dr. Sri Iqbal. We welcome inputs, feedbacks, ideas, suggestions to the National Recovery Council. I think you probably are referring to the MM2H in particular, given that I don't think we have made any major change in policies with regard to foreign labor. So on the MM2H, there have been concerns raised by the affected communities, we hear the concerns, we hear the input and feedback given to us, and this, as what the Minister of Home Affairs have said, we'll be having a review and a discussion on this very soon, after getting more feedback from all the relevant stakeholders.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Datuk Seri Mohamed Iqbal, we just have to cut it short because the Minister has an engagement right after this. So Minister, thank you so much for your time. YB Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul bin Tengku Abdul Aziz. Thank you for your time. Thank you for making time for the keynote address. Thank you for the dialogue. And also thank you so much.
Virtual clap for this.
Thank you so much also to our moderator, Datuk Seri Mohamed Iqbal, Chairman of the ECKL, for such a interesting dialogue session.